the slide thing on the side.
Yeah, I just slid it. Not good.
And then,
I've catch it.
then you hit the red button.
Oh, it's asking me for a folder. See, that's right. Stop touching that.
Hand off.
Yep, no. My luck, I'll wipe out like 16 meetings of
Yeah,
ready
right. And then have to deal with Kathy. Rat and Kathy.
Cool.
Oh, we're live. All right, it's 6:01. We're going to call to order the December, February 10th meeting of the Tilton Northfield Fire District Safer Grant Committee. Let the record show that all members of the committee are present, including Chief Sitar. And we don't really have an agenda. But
So what I've brought to the meeting tonight is the PowerPoint presentation that I've showed it to the commissioners at our last commissioner meeting. But if you want to turn near the end of it, it's called the Safer Grant Effect. And we can review these slides, slide by slide. But at the beginning of it, I basically say that the Safer Grant added 4 firefighter EMTs to the fire department, 1 per shift of the 4 shifts. I explain how each shift is comprised of a captain, a paramedic, an advanced EMT, and a basic EMT. That's the base level. Most of the safer employees that we were hired at the basic level have attained their A. But this is the base level. And I calculated the cost of the safer employees. If they were included in the in our tax rate currently, it would be 36 cents for all 4 employees. And it's basically 9 cents per employee. And when I went further, it's basically 9 cents for almost all the employees. I myself and Deputy Jubert are 10 cents each. Just because of our salaries.
so it would have been, so if you have a $100,000 house and $360, is it?
No,
No.
$2.60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I did the math wrong. In my head.
No, it's like
It's
$90
It's
for
$36.
$250.
$36 per thousand.
Per 100.
Right, I had the right math. I just put 2 in the zeros.
Per 100,000. So, you know,
36.
yeah, just, you know, if you had a $300,000 house, it'd be $108.
Yeah. Is there anything else that cost? I mean, well, the town taxes and all that costs way more than that, so. That,
Yeah, so the total cost of the fire department on the tax rate is $2 and, yeah, depending upon which town it is, it's $2 and change.
we used to have
Yeah, I know it used to be posted up here, but
a,
I think when we put this
Yeah,
picture
we
up,
took
they
it
took that down.
Here it is. 2021, $2.17 on the back.
In Tilton and Northfield, it's different because they're, the evaluation cycles between Tilton and Northfield are different.
Did you say 217?
217.
and that's for the 2020.
That's for 2021. Northfield is 2021 for the fire district is $2.58 a thousand.
258 or 68?
258.
Is it Northfield doing an evaluation? When's our next reevaluation?
Every 5 years.
Yeah,
It's
but when's
every
the last time
5
they
years,
do it?
but
We do
I
this
don't,
every year, it's updated.
Well, like last year, Tilton did it, and everyone got like some sticker shock.
We don't do the whole town. We do a fifth of the town, then a fifth of their town. then a
Oh,
fifth of
so it's
Yeah.
just, okay.
And we use that fifth of the town to evaluate the rest of the town
Yeah,
for that period of time.
I got you. That's an interesting way of doing it. from what I've seen, having the fourth staff member on has made a difference in terms of quality service.
Sure, and if you want to start turning to the next slides, we can kind of go over that. So the next slide shows how many incidents we had in 2020 and then 2021, basically the same. We had 4 more incidents last year than in 2020. But here's where you start seeing the differences. The response time to the second call of a simultaneous call has been cut in half because we're able to get that second ambulance or respond immediately to that other call, whereas before we just couldn't do it. We can handle 2 medical calls at the same time currently, whereas before we really couldn't. The next page shows ambulance transports. So how many patients we transported in 2020 was 844. And in 2021 it was 929. Now that's given that we had the same amount of cost. So,
I feel like we should show more years. I don't know.
well,
It's me.
the difference is the previous 2 years before 2020, the incident numbers were basically the same. I can show more years, but the data is, the delta is still going to be the same.
So you think you captured 85 more transports, basically?
Yes, and the reason we did that is illustrated on the next slide, where is in 2020, and this is indicative of every year before then, is that we used approximately 400% more mutual aid ambulance transports than what we gave. But by having the additional personnel, you'll see that we were able to provide more mutual aid, and as a result, we also used less mutual aid, and that's really where the delta comes in that 85 transports. So given that 85 additional transports, we're able to generate. On the next slide, it'll show we generated in 2020 $437,000, and in 2021, because of those additional transports, we generated $523,000. That's a big jump, and this is the first time we've collected over $500,000.
Is that collected that we've collected from Comstar?
That's money in the bank. That's not billed, because that's a whole nother story between what we bill and what Medicare, and our provider, I mean, who we transport mostly is a lot of Medicare patients, so we get a flat rate of, it's around $500 for a Medicare patient. Medicaid patient, it's substantially less. That's a state assisted patient. Private insurance is it's better, and self-pay, they have to pay the whole boat. So those that are what I think are the main points that I've tried to capture and show why we need the additional personnel and what the effect is. And I think the biggest thing is the response time. And as we all know, sitting at this table, when you can cut 7 minutes off of response time, that's brain cells and heart cells that we're able to save in a critical, medical emergency or a trauma or something like that. And that's priceless, really.
Make a difference in minutes. Someone's waiting.
Now, can you show any fire matrices in this as far as improvement the past year those guys made on the fire side, like for building fires or anything like that?
So the way we respond to, if it's, comes in as a building fire, all 4 firefighters respond on the engine.
Okay.
So it's not gonna show a change in response time in that respect. But what it does is it makes it much more efficient on the fire ground when you get there, having 4 personnel rather than 3.
I don't know, a data set we could use to, I mean, not like a value loss, but,
Yeah, so that might be a tough one to
Dollars,
measure.
how do you judge dollars saved, I guess would be the
Yeah.
property damage.
And then,
it'd have to be a comparable fire year with a similar things, but that would be a tough.
If we had 23 fires each year.
I mean, did it make a difference at the last fire you had, for instance, like the one was it up in Northfield? Did it make a difference, you think? Like, is there an example that?
I don't know how to quantify it to someone like, you know that it makes a difference to have 4 guys on a truck
Yeah.
versus 3, but how do you
Like-
quantify that?
Like,
I would say it allows the officer to properly supervise what's going on, and gives him the time to do a 360, and to give him a proper evaluation of what's going on around the whole building, and not have to be, backing up the nozzle man while somebody's outside running around. The officer can be outside supervising what's going on and help with, taking the kinks out of the hose while the 2 guys are making an attack, an interior attack, or help things, but able to stay outside if they can. And certainly if there has to be a life-saving rescue or something like that, you have the 2 in and 2 out, right then and there, whereas before we didn't.
Would it be fair to say that the officer would be able to determine if mutual aid is needed sooner? I mean, I don't know.
Well, if it's toned out as a structure fire,
You're
we
basically-
get automatic aid anyways. They're coming.
No, I specifically said the fire in Northfield, I remember that, Franklin had a turnaround.
Yeah, they were too busy to
Yeah,
come.
they had some, happened to be listening to Skinner that night, so.
They actually had 5 guys on the first new truck for that fire, because somebody happened to be at the station.
Oh, yeah,
But
it's
so
still-
that's why it's so tough, it's so anecdotal, like,
yeah.
how do you...
I don't know.
And the reality is, I mean, my impression, my personal opinion is, that's not a great sell to the tax base. We don't sell them on fire protection. It doesn't seem to be the thing that they buy into.
I think it's the benefit.
It's in ambulance coverage.
But even in January, you had, was it 60% of your calls were
Simultaneous.
simultaneous calls?
Yeah, 62% of our calls, or 63% of our calls
Yeah, it was a
in
high-
January was simultaneous incidents.
But you were able to cover almost all of them.
Yeah. I mean, we did use I forget how many mutual aid ambulance transports we had in January, but one of them was that car accident at Clark, which actually was 2 car accidents, and both were ALS transports.
Well, sometimes you just need
It
more than
just-
2
it just-
ambulances. Yeah.
Just worked out that we ended up using
Yeah.
Sanverton and Franklin.
Yeah, and then we had 5 patients at the Mosquito Bridge.
And we used everybody.
But I think the important thing is you're able to get someone on scene faster. And that could be the matter of someone surviving or,
Well, the other thing that is kind of intangible too is we aren't sending people to calls alone anymore.
yeah.
Like, if you were to go outside of our organization and, for what it's worth, and tell any other, when I did my medic ride time and I went and rode with other fire departments, and we only had 3 on shift here, they're like, you do what? You send people alone to call? Are you guys out of your minds?
Yeah.
So there's a risk, a risk factor, protection of the fire department in a risk sense, that people aren't alone in calls way the heck out in the far reaches of the district anymore. But these things are, I don't know how you quantify them.
Well, I think, where we are today, right? And what the information we have to present at the district meeting is very much what you captured here. But the fact of the matter is there's 4 guys here, 4 new guys, extra guys now. There'll be 4 extra guys after district meeting, and there'll be 4 extra guys next year. So while this is important information, this is not really what we're charged to do, right?
Right.
So,
How after,
3 years, when the 3 years are up.
2 years, 2 years from now,
right,
how
No.
are we gonna pay for 2 extra firefighters, or, I'm sorry, 4 extra firefighters, 1 per shift?
right. And that's not something we're gonna resolve in 1 or 2 meetings, but, so, I mean, this is all great background information. But I don't think this is, you know, if somebody stands up and asks at the district meeting, hey, you know, what's the benefit of your 4 extra guys? This is great. But you can count on somebody standing up and saying, how are we gonna pay for those 4 extra guys in 3 years? So,
Ultimately, I think most of that burden will be on the tax rate. If the voters decide to support keeping those additional 4 personnel. And I think one of the things that we need to look at is where can we find some, to cover some of that cost. And I know some folks will look at additional ambulance revenue, but that really can't go directly against the cost because it's 2 separate budgets. You can't take ambulance revenue. As the revenue fund is set up and right now, unless you change the purpose of that revenue fund, you can't use any of that to offset operating or salary costs.
I think we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot as a district too if we tried to fund these positions impartially or in its entirety, indefinitely with an alternative revenue source. Because eventually this organization is going to continue to grow in 15, 20 years. Eventually we're going to have to put more than 4 people on a shift. And if we've done this stopgap measure where we pay for 50%, I'm just taking numbers out of the air here, you know, we pay for 50% of the 4th guy on the shift out of the ambulance revenue. Well, what do we do when it's time to put 5 people on duty? Do we now have to?
well, I'm sorry, I thought you were done, go ahead.
So I feel like we would be better served if we stretched the shift onto the tax burden, if I'm using the right word.
Yeah.
Rather than try
Make
to
it-
fund
make it-
these people with an extra source.
Make it a progressive.
Oh,
Well, if we had
Taxation.
the traditional safer grant, we would have eased our way into it,
Yeah.
because we would have been responsible for percentage each year. But now we're gonna go from 0 to 100.
So here's the thing, you know, we talked a little bit about alternative funding methodologies at the last meeting.
Yeah, I saw that in the notes.
And that, I think, is we can kind of hang our hat on that as being this progression, right? If we look at the capital improvement plan and we look at what's potentially available for a year or maybe 2 years at the absolute most, I think to kind of sweep some of that funding into this program temporarily, and then to your comments, yeah, at some point we're going to need more, and at that point there better be more tax base to pay for it, because if there isn't more tax base, where is the extra need coming from?
Well, in theory, it would be going hand in hand. As
Right.
the communities grew and the tax base grew,
Exactly.
the service demand would grow.
Exactly. So what I'm really kind of, in my feeble brain, I'm kind of focusing on this kind of progressive stopgap funding for maybe a year or 2 after the grant expires, right? And if we're going to, you know, I thought you were going to bring this for everyone. The chief,
It's on my desk.
the chief had done the capital improvement plan, and basically, you know, we're looking at, in 2025, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million or so in the capital improvement, in the equipment and apparatus fund, okay? And And it stays pretty stable as it's projected out because our equipment needs are going to be relatively minor in those coming years. So if we look at from like 2025 and 2026, you know, $1 to $1.5 million of surplus in that fund. So, I think if we're going to recommend that we tap some of this, under no circumstances should we deplete it. I mean, it's not like a piggy bank that we can all reach into, but if we can come up with a fiscally sound plan of tapping some of this, we might, I'm not sure it's a good idea to present that at this year's district meeting, but I think it would be wise to plant the seed at some level and certainly have our ducks in a row such that we can put something in place for next year's district meeting as far as a warrant article. And by having our ducks in a row, I mean not just us, but being able to present that to the community and, you know, kind of beat it into their heads, you know. This is something that we need to do, not spring it on them at district meeting and everybody goes, whoa, wait a second.
But hey, we brought this up last year. This is what we were talking about last year. Yeah.
And also talk about it throughout the year, you know.
No.
So here's a question for you.
Still have to get the support of the commissioners for whatever we come up with, and
I would looked at it.
if we're gonna do that, the budget committee. You should have a copy of that from the budget.
Yeah, I just haven't looked at it in a few months.
That's where you gave it to us at the last budget.
Because I'm just thinking out loud, if we're making $500,000 a year in ambulance revenue, and there's no real big capital expenses as far as, other than the ambulance this year, or well, last year, and then hopefully C3's car, wouldn't it be much more than 1.2 million?
So we do have other expenses that come out of that every year, all our equipment expenses, anything new like turnout gear, EMS supplies, EMS billing, all rescue equipment, fire equipment if we need, you know, nozzles or whatever, which I don't expect us to be needing or not, but there's an annual expense shown in there every year for each of those items as well.
Yeah, that's only about
It was like 60,000 this year for
yeah,
just
60 to 100.
just for-
So
Yeah, so it's not a
So
lot.
400,000 though over 4 years, that alone is 1.2, and there's already 800 in there. So I think it would be a lot more than what's on the sheet.
Well,
Well, I'm sorry.
go
I
ahead.
think the chief, you know, as, when I was commissioner, you beat this into our heads, which was that his projections are always quite conservative, so that we don't get caught with our pants down.
That's
Sure. I just think it's going to be a lot higher than that personally.
It very well
Especially
may
with the
be.
extra captured numbers. For me personally, I think that you have a good point. I think that you probably shouldn't put all the burden on, well, we shouldn't be relying on that fund to pay for physicians, but the more I think about it, I think we're going to have to tap into that funding somehow for
Well,
building,
what
mainly,
if-
is where
oh,
I'm
yeah.
seeing. Like, I don't know how much that bond would be a year, but let's say, is it feasible that the building bond would be as low as 100 or 200,000 a year? Or is it too early to tell?
I mean, some of the stuff that the building committee, that we talked about last night, that some of the members of the building committee are like proposing that we add an addition or do a renovation of Park Street of and by itself at a cost of, you know, $3 or $4.5 million. You know, talking about metal building type of thing or stuff, you know. They said they've already come up with their needs from something that I helped in the first building committee back in 2015. So they were talking about 10,000 square foot addition onto Park Street. But there were other discussions, but I think we don't know what the cost is going to be, and I personally haven't seen what they're proposing. They haven't let me see it or have given it to me, what actually they intend to include in this fire station.
Is it on like the back of a napkin or something?
Yeah.
I guess I should just ask the chairman of the committee to give me everything he's got.
If we're talking about a couple of, just spitballing, a couple of years that we're shifting this. Can we do something like, say, with a warrant article, you know, with the support of the commissioners, whatever the hoops that have to be, like, we're gonna take $300,000 over 2 years out of the apparatus and equipment fund and use it to offset that cost. Is that the route? And then that way, like, it almost doesn't matter what the building committee comes up with, because we'll be done what we're doing by the time they figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, probably. It might work out that way.
Well,
I think then the building committee isn't planning to bring anything until
2024.
2023 or 2024, depending upon how things go.
The last thing I heard is they're gonna make their pitch the same year we have to start doing something about the grant guys.
So our pitch better have been made and very well planted and.
Probably not gonna go well, no.
So,
If we try to do both of those
Yeah,
on the
we
same
can't,
year.
it's not
And,
gonna
That's
and,
fly.
and ultimately, I think all of us agree here that personnel is way more important
Yeah,
than a building.
for sure.
Building's not going anywhere to help us save anybody.
Buildings don't change these numbers.
So here's one of the dilemmas that we all have, which is the fire department is one of those luxuries that people only use when they need them, right? But the money comes out of their pocket all the time, right? So there seems to be a laser focus on the cost, right? The cost of anything related to the fire department. It's as if the performance or the adequacy or the benefit is always a secondary consideration to the cost, okay? So what the chief has done with this information is shown two things. Number one, the benefit is right there, black and white, tangible. We see the benefit from a performance standpoint, from a protection of the community standpoint, and we also see a tremendous financial benefit. So this document, this presentation that you know, again, this is going to be planting the seed, is huge, because it's showing that we can get better performance of the department and have a revenue stream also. It helps pay for it, okay? So it's crucial that we project that. That look, we're doing a better job at protecting you, and
Making more money.
the side benefit is we're funding it too. So let's take some of that money that those four people are bringing to the community. Let's take some of that money that they are bringing in and put it back into maintaining that staffing level.
That service level, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that I'm sure that fund can support it for a couple of years to help soften the blow on the, you know, that 36 cents on the tax rate. If it were to happen all at once, it's, okay, here's 36 cents, your tax is going up 36 cents per thousand.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I like Matt's idea of kind of opening that piggy bank, you know, having the piggy bank on the table now and putting some money in it maybe next year and some money in it the next year, knowing that it will be used on that.
along that line, tapping that fund, because it always seems at district meeting that the unassigned fund balance gets tapped.
It does.
Driven by one or two people,
Right.
and from a fundamental standpoint, it's a good argument, right? Why do we have this huge unassigned fund balance? It's a slush fund, okay? That it's oftentimes, in my opinion, it's the manner in which that's done, which is so crass
Right.
and so abrasive. But from a fundamental standpoint, you should ask yourself, if DRA says we need X amount of money as a
Buffer.
Above,
Hold
yeah.
ourselves, basically what we use the money for is at the beginning of the year, when we're not getting revenue from the municipalities, we use that money so we don't have to go out and borrow money to pay the salaries of
and that's for the first 3 months of the year, right?
2 months. Yeah.
up to
It's
district meeting.
16.67% of the operating budget is what we should have in the unassigned fund balance.
So is that number based upon the fact that our budget year starts January 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so I've heard you say that 100 times, but I never knew that was the reason for it, and maybe other people don't also. Because what you've always said is DRA mandates that we have this.
They don't mandate it.
Or they recommend it.
And when we have our auditors, the auditors were in this week, and by the way, our unassigned fund balances, and they took a whole bunch of money out of it because of the pending court case with the water district. So if we were gonna have 500,000 in there, it's not gonna be 500,000, because they say that's
Well,
what
they
we
probably
have.
made us take out
They
the
took out-
125,000 or
Oh,
so.
well, no, it's more than that, it's what they billed us. They're taking out.
The water department, you mean, what they build you for?
Oh, so they're the auditors are saying, you gotta put this in a little nest egg.
And you
until
can't
your
use
lawsuit-
it. It's gotta stay there until the court case or we come to terms.
Wow.
And we're not gonna know that until November.
No, right, but we know now that we're not gonna be able to use whatever number they say it is, I don't know. They
Right,
still
but our
there.
unassigned fund balance as of 2020 was $626,000.
Yeah, they rated it last year though.
Right, but I'm just saying, they pulled out money out of it. So let's say it was down to 400,000. And we thought, okay, we might be putting 100,000 back. We're really not. We could actually have a net loss of that, of another 100,000, pulling that down to 400.
Closer to 200.
Well, so, yeah, well, no, but have it, we added 100,000
Yeah, from this year.
from this year, but no, now we gotta take 100,000 out, so now we're down to a net 300 or something.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that cuts it really close.
Yeah.
Can we do a thought exercise?
Can we do a what?
A thought exercise.
Sure.
You can tell me if this is, you don't want to deal with this. This actually came out of the class that you guys sent, the CPS class. So basically they're talking about you have a problem, and we have our obvious solution that we want to go for, which is using the capital improvement fund. Let's say that we can't do that. Let's take that option off the table. What are our options then?
There is the tower fund, which can help support that. And hopefully by then there'll be two or three tenants on the tower and collecting a higher revenue than, it might be up to $30,000 a year in revenue on the tower, maybe more, I don't know how it's gonna work out.
Still, that's 30,000. And didn't we make that 50% for something?
50% of it can go to offset the operating budget, and that's
So that's 15,000.
that was your thing at the last year's budget committee, and
I feel like
how to recommend accepting, starting that revenue fund. And then the other 50% is, goes into a fund which the commissioners are agents to help offset building costs, maintenance costs, and things like that, which we didn't have any money in until just this year. Now that was like $2,500. Maybe it helped with the siding of the Park Street Station, we'll see. Or communication needs,
Well, we gotta get that repaired. It looks like we're in that building a little longer,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think to your point, Matt, it's pretty slim pickings, other revenue sources.
Without taking, we talked a little bit about businesses, whether we can reach out to businesses in the last meeting.
So.
I don't know what that looks like.
So we have reached out, Deputy Joubert specifically, to some, like to 3M and some other businesses where we go to train on certain things, and they will contribute towards purchasing equipment for confined space or trench rescue or things like that. So in that respect, that can help offset some of the budget. I don't know if they'll contribute, to the personnel costs.
But see, here's the thing, is that money would be contributed into a fund that we can't tap, right? Because indirectly, right, if you buy equipment, that means that means you're not using the equipment and apparatus fund, which means bloats, but we can't access that.
Right.
So I really think that we need to plant that seed of utilizing that. And here's another great argument when someone says, you guys always want to tap that. Well, in the budget for the past several years, we've been adding $100,000 into the building fund.
This
So
is kind of
we're-
the same concept.
What we're doing is we're indirectly funding the equipment and apparatus fund through that building fund. Because we will not be taking money out of the equipment and apparatus fund. No, I'm sorry.
The other way around is
that's-
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We take some money that was gonna go into the equipment and apparatus fund, and we put it into the building fund, correct? Or we-
No,
It's a
it's
separate,
different.
two separate
Oh,
things
no, I'm sorry.
altogether.
It's with taxation, is how we're
Right.
doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a bad argument, sorry.
Well, so like Franklin, this is a few years old now, but they went to Clear Choice, and they got a deal with Clear Choice, where Clear Choice paid for their paramedic school, as long as Franklin slapped a Clear Choice sticker on the side of the ambulance. I got $9,000
It's this big.
for a Clear Choice sticker on the side of the ambulance. Like, there have to be,
Sponsorships, yeah, let's put sponsorships all over stuff.
like,
There are other places that do
Make
it.
them like a NASCAR.
Yeah, exactly. Might be a trendsetter there.
You gotta show up with,
different, yeah,
Right.
different embroidery all
Yeah,
over.
that's a whole separate level, yeah. when you put it on-
Band-Aid.
I was thinking just a truck.
Band-Aid.
I read
Good
I read an article about that. There was a police department, I don't know if it was Mesa, Arizona, it was in Arizona, I don't know if it was Mesa or what, Tempe or whatever, where they were having businesses sponsor police cruisers. And the police cruisers looked like billboards for these businesses. But there was a moral dilemma or ethical dilemma, really. So when one of these the police department has an action against the business because the business owner got caught DUI or something like that, and they say, "Hey, I
My
bought
face is
that.
on the side of your car.
Yeah, I bought that cruiser." You know, so in the end, they ended up divesting themselves of that because they didn't want to have to be. It was an ethical thing. You know?
Can we as a district, a village district?
And if we do that here, we have to inspect everything. And if businesses are contributing to us, and it's something that we have to inspect, and say they fail that inspection, they say, can't you kind of look the other way on this one? I just gave you $20,000 for this or that, you know?
How is it different from the other grants we get from them, though? Like Walmart gives us $1,000 a year. Yeah.
You need that 100 times.
What's that?
You need that 100 times.
I mean, every little bit is. I guess the way every little bit counts. So like
No.
they're about to build a multi-million-dollar resort on the
Well,
Anchorage,
yeah, so-
and we don't have impact fees for.
Well, that's what I was about to
Right.
say.
I was
Can
just
we
thinking
as a
that too,
district
impact
put,
fees.
well, you're also in Northfield, you're gonna have an apartment complex supposedly going.
Sure, and a distribution center. I mean, we have all kinds of
The
things.
distribution center's done and approved, but these other things aren't. So can, like a town can put, impact fees in, can a district, the village district do that?
That's a good question. I'm gonna write that one down. I'm gonna send that out to Paul Fitzgerald, because he's the.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
like,
right.
could you
Municipal
put a,
law.
you know, put an impact fee, I mean, granted, it won't be huge, but if it's, you know, something.
I think we're kind of in an every little bit. It
Yeah.
helps
It might all
situation.
add up.
and again, to Matt's point that he made last meeting, which is, this is a short-term window that we have to kind of fill, you know, the stopgap until the time comes when development is such that those 4 people would have been mandated regardless.
Yeah, we're not asking 3M to pay for a guy every year.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, if we're looking at maybe a 2 or 3 year window,
Well, just trying to soften the burden on the taxpayers of, like this safer grant originally would have been where, you know, in year 3, we would have been paying, what, 75% of the bill.
Something like that, yeah. When I first, this was a long time ago, when Safer started, it was a 5-year program. It was 90, 80, like, I don't know, 60, 50, 30, something like that. and the municipalities had to offset the cost of those things. But it was over a 5-year period, so it just softened the blow so much so at the end of that 5-year period, you were paying most of it anyways. Although there were still communities that decided to stop it, and Laconia was one of them. I don't know how long you've been on, but
Well, they're the only community in the country that gave back a SAFER grant and got it back in the same month
Yes.
period.
yeah.
Because the need was so extraordinarily high on the grant application. But I don't know, I think maybe we need to take a step back, because I like the gap stop, but I remember when we went to the meeting to get the SAFER grant guys, there was a big push that we would figure out a way to pay for it so it wouldn't be an impact to the taxpayers as much. So do we want to maybe set a goal, maybe like a 50% goal? I feel like that might be a worthy goal, to try to find 50% of that out of somewhere to pay for it.
Forever.
Well, maybe not forever, but maybe we don't set a 2 or 3 year timeline, because I don't know how long it's going to take industry to catch up, or business, or some of those things to catch up. But you know, instead of 36 cents, if you're down to 18 cents, that's a much, I think, easier thing for people to be like, okay,
It's easier pill to swallow.
easier pill to swallow. And I know we kind of did suggest that when we, you know, got the funding. So maybe if we just use that as a target goal, we might be able to sneak that out. If that's
Because the schools are gonna be hitting their taxes here pretty hard from what I hear. You know, and that's gonna be the next couple of years too.
I mean, I personally, I mean, I think eventually this apparatus and equipment fund balance is going to get to the point where it's going to be large enough where I think it can support something else. Now, I don't know if that's going to be staffed at the station. I think personally, the more I've thought about it, I think the station's probably a better idea than the staff for some of the reasons you mentioned. But, you know, when you get into the more and more people and the bigger the community is, you know, sometimes you do have to make stuff last a little bit longer. I mean, you look at some of the municipalities around here, I mean, some of their equipment is absolute junk. Now, I'm not advocating that that's what we do, but if there's a possibility to stretch something along another year or two here or there, just to kind of free up some money for stuff like this, I think we at least have to look at it. Not necessarily do it, but at least run all the financials and see kind of what's possible and where it wrangles out. And then maybe that includes, I don't know when the last time you did an ambulance billing revenue survey to see if your rates are in line.
Oh yeah,
They're
we
probably-
did that 2 years ago, and we were paying 7%, and now we're paying like 6%. 7.5%, we're down to 6% now with a new
For
contract.
collection. I meant
For
like the
collections.
actual billing charges for like
Oh,
how much you're charged.
We're charged way more than we
Way
could ever
more?
collect, yeah.
Would it be worth, Scott, utilizing this for the first year after the grant position? We do 100% of the cost out of the apparatus and equipment fund.
That would be like $380,000 or $400,000 by then.
So then there's no tax burden on the community for the first year, and then the next year we follow the SAFER model out of that fund. Then it gives us a finite dollar amount we're talking about taking out of it. So we're going to say in 5 years we're taking, I don't know what the math adds up to, but we can say this is the amount of money we're going to use, and we'll know what it propagates over 10, 15 years in the capital improvement fund. I don't know if I'm calling them the right
It's
things.
like a
I
3 year
apologize.
step down.
Or even 5 years, whatever.
I could run that model, that's easy enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should look at it.
Well,
for
5
sure.
year would be 20% every year.
Yeah, so if you did like 180, 60, 40, 20.
But, you know, I do think we should capitalize somewhere with that extra 85, hopefully maybe 100,000 when all this rolls out in a couple of years. If it is a $100,000 increase, we should capitalize that on that somewhere, whether it's in the building committee stuff or with this stuff somewhere. I feel like there's some opportunity to use it, per se.
I guess I'm nervous about the precedent of indefinitely tying staffing to the capital improvement fund.
That
Yeah.
would, in the long run, that would kill it.
Here's a question though, just an observation.
Yeah.
So this number, this 523 and the 437, that's 12 months.
Yep.
This is 12 months.
Yep.
But we only had the SAFER grant in play starting in February.
Well, yeah, in actuality, they weren't really effectively operating it as,
Until March.
well, it was closer to April.
So
So
This-
there is wiggle room
if
there.
let's just say you go April to April just to see what the revenue is, that would be interesting.
You could do that.
You know, I mean, this is a good number, but maybe it's.
It
really-
could be a little better.
I don't know, just a thought. Because based on your patients transported, it's $563.
Well, this fluctuates
person.
too. If we keep marching out on the numbers we're doing the last 2 months, we're gonna be far and away above our call. I mean, you know, it's early to tell, but we're 50 calls a month ahead of what we normally are.
Right. But
So this number
you
will
have to look
go
at
even
it as
more.
a business, a little bit as a business, because that means that we're collecting more.
That's like,
Yeah,
We know. I mean, I come from the hotel business, and our occupancy is up. Well, that's translated to more money, you know, versus
And
what
that-
we budgeted.
And that was kind of what I was stressing a little bit, where, you know, stressing the benefit of it is, you know, you're talking to a few people.
Right.
You talk the financials of it, and you're talking to everybody.
Yep.
and you made a good point last meeting that has been kind of turning around in my head about we're at a plateau of calls the last few years, and I think I didn't even think about it. I think you're right that lends to a false sense of security. That we're going to all of a sudden have this development that we've just been talking about, and everyone's going to say, well, the last three or 4 years, you've only done 2,000 calls. What would change that make
But
you not
you've
2,000
you've
calls?
been more productive, where you went up in the transports from 844 in 2020 to 929. I'm not good at math, but that's about 80.
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying, is we've got this false sense of 2,000 calls a year, and this being the
Right.
number, and
You're 2,000, but you're actually doing more with those.
there's a potential boom that we might be doing more with 2,400 calls.
Yeah.
So this number could be even higher. I guess that's what I'm trying to go with.
could be.
And that's why, you know, when we discussed this last meeting, was trying to extrapolate those numbers.
Do a trend, you can add a trend line to that too.
Because that,
But you wanna take out the other, if you're gonna do a trend line, you wanna show this and then what the trend is, not everything else in there too, because the
Right.
trend line gets lost in
yeah,
that,
and there's no reason not to do another graph with just the trend line.
yeah.
But,
You can even do a trend line over bar graphs too, just that.
what if we, great point about, you know, about metering it down over time. Great point about trying to populate a fund with money in the interim. We still have 2 years before this hits us, right?
Yep.
So if we can get a warrant article for next year, get a couple years of funding into this pot, use that for the first year of the metering down to cover the 50% estimate, and then diminish
So-
from there out of the equipment and apparatus fund.
So, next year, in 2023, for $100,000, and then in 2024, actually in 2024 is when it's gonna hit.
Right, actually, just based on what someone said, April of 2021 is when it started. So really, the first quarter of 2024, when this takes effect, is still gonna be covered. So 25% of the
Well,
cost is gonna
no.
be covered by the budget.
February
But-
February 8th of 2024 is when the grant period ends.
All right,
Right, because that was it was the first day they started
yeah,
training and all that.
I got you. All right.
Okay,
So
then it-
there's gonna be a period, the commissioners and the budget committee are gonna have to decide before we get to district meeting, how are we gonna fund this, because those guys they're gonna have to make that decision, because those guys are gonna still be working before district meeting. And and after February 8th, anything that they work on after February 8th to the district meeting will be on the tax rate.
So that kind of expedites the program a little bit, but it really mandates that if we intend on doing anything with the equipment and apparatus fund, we've got to have it ready for next year.
Yes.
Darn right. And maybe even having a second warrant article, or at least a backup plan of, is there somewhere else in the budget where we can come up with some money in order to soften that blow the next year?
The only thing in the budget that is discretionary, I would say, is really training. What will happen though with the new engine and the other new ambulance is that our maintenance line item is going to go down. Other than that, the only other discretionary, and that's, maintenance is not really discretionary, it's something that you have to do. But the maintenance is still going to be there, but the repairs is going to be a lot less. We're not going to be spending, tens of thousands of dollars every year to keep some of this stuff on the road.
So let me throw this out. Now again, I'm kind of working on this model of this sequentially funding, putting more burden on the taxpayers, because at some point it's inevitable. So I'm kind of focusing on the first year or two after the grant. Okay. So if we have this plan, we presently have a fund, a warrant article every year to set up a fund for the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should we propose a fund, a 1 or 2 year fund for personnel costs, where we still take the money from taxation, but instead of it being $400,000 in the first year, we have a fund where we've populated it with, say, $50,000 or $100,000 this year, knowing that we'll use it for that then, to soften the blow then.
We only have,
Granted, overall, it's all coming from taxation, but
we only have really one bite at the apple here, and that's next year, and with warrant articles, because the time to do a warrant article now is already passed for this district meeting. So we only have next district meeting for any warrant articles or funding mechanisms, if we want to change them or add or whatever. It has to be done at next district meeting, and we only have that 1 year where we can set funds aside or add to or whatever until in 2024. When we get to district meeting in 2024, we're voting whether we're going to keep the folks on or not. And with our plan in place, that's what it's, so we have to start next year. This is our plan, this is what the Safer Committee came up with, this is our plan, this is the warrant article that makes that plan workable. And so when in 2024, these funds will be used, and this mechanism will be used to help offset the costs of the grant firefighters for the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years, or however we figure it out to be.
You saying this made me think of something that's a little bit off topic, but I think it pertains to this. I think the more we're talking about this, I'm thinking that next year having something in that is key for all the reasons that she said, and for the people that are working for us.
right.
So next year, we as a district,
Right.
the voters come out and say, hey, oh yeah, you know what, we're ready to, this is something we gotta do, let's think ahead, let's put $200,000 aside, whatever the number is. That's gonna say to those employees, I'm gonna have a job next year. And that's huge to that employee. Once we get down to the tail end of that, there's a chance that we're doing is people who worked for us for 3 years, who are now incredibly marketable individuals, are going to be like, there's been no word from this community about whether or not I'm going to have a job in a year. This is time for me to start hunting for another one. And I think that what the chief's saying, by having something together by this time next
Yes.
year, we're gonna be saying something to our employees about our community's intention for them in another year's
Our
time.
commitment to you.
Well, I think but at least it was my intention, I guess, to do the equipment and apparatus fund warrant article next year regardless,
Mhm.
right? It was just really an issue of at what level.
Yeah.
I think that's mandatory.
Well, we might need another year of data too. I think another year of data.
We'll
would
have
help,
that,
too.
but
Yeah.
we'll have a good
Trend.
year and a half by the time we have to start discussing warrant articles.
True, even another
Yeah.
half year of data.
Well,
would help.
a year and 3/4.
So by this time next year,
It's gonna have to be on,
we'll have to have it figured out.
so this fall, we have to make that.
Well, actually, that extra revenue technically wasn't a full year of them on, right? Because they started in April.
They technically started in February, but they weren't, we were holding their hands for,
Yeah.
and not letting them work as if they were, two-man, two crews type of deal, you know? If they were on the ambulance, the engine was going with them anyways, just because they were so green that we didn't want to cut them loose with that type of deal. So there was a couple months where we were really holding their hands until they were able to, function as we intended them to be able to function.
Okay, so I think we're all anticipating an upward trend in the number of calls and the amount of revenue. If we look at this data from this year, there were how many mutual aid calls? 38 of them that we received, 39 of them. Ambulance mutual aid. How many of those were because we didn't have the fourth man on? In other words, would that number have been even smaller?
How many of those were in January, February, March?
I can run those numbers.
We're getting kind of deep here, but I'm just looking at the chief's mutual aid given. I mean, all this given mutual aid that we have right here, that's all revenue for us also.
Yes, that's one of the points that I made. That's the delta between what we gave the previous year and what we gave last year is
It's
like
double.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
double.
And that's revenue for
because
us.
we have the availability to.
You can accept that mutual aid request because you're keeping an ambulance still available in town.
Right.
I mean,
So
we're getting deep in the layers, but
that's a double-edged sword. That's a double-edged sword, because yes, you can say, yeah, we're obtaining revenue from it. But there's people that are gonna stand up and say, I don't want my equipment in the neighboring town. I don't want my personnel in the neighboring town. So those people tend to have a big
There's
voice.
a commissioner that doesn't want
Yes.
us to do,
transfers.
Transfers.
Yeah.
So
We do 20 of them a year.
Is that what this is here, the proposed, is that something different? That's not transfer revenue, right? Like it says
No.
proposed that's not what, okay. So you're probably only making 15,000 then a year?
We do about 20.
the transfer,
We do-
proposed transfers doesn't do with the ambulance calls, that's just transfers of.
Oh, okay.
Proposed transfers from our warrant articles.
Okay.
The warrant articles that we have are proposing that we take $44,368 out of the unassigned fund balance. So we don't know what the 626 number is going to be yet this year, but whatever that number is, the commissioners and the budget committee have recommended taking $44,368 out of there to fund certain warrant articles.
And then there's a certain residents of the district that will reword some of the warrant articles to make it.
Oh,
from the-
try to.
Try to,
Yeah, I know some of it might more be coming out of the unreserved.
yeah.
There's basically two other warrant articles where people may try to take from the unassigned fund balance, and that's the $100,000 that's going to the building, land and building fund, and the $100,000 for the cistern and dry hydrant account.
I'm gonna go off topic just very quickly here. With respect to the unassigned fund balance and the 17%, if I recall correctly, that's in the bylaws of this district.
It's in the, it's a policy that the fire commissioners have accepted due to the recommendation of the auditors and DRA.
So it's a
It's an
policy.
what's those ASB accounting, ASB accounting standards.
So
It's a national standard that we should be
But it-
abiding by,
okay, so it's not in the bylaws, it's a policy.
yes,
And that policy was approved by Board of Commissioners.
yes,
And it's not been rescinded by the Board of Commissioners.
no.
So can, at town meeting, or at district meeting, can policies be overwritten by a vote of the public?
Yes.
Okay. That answers that. Thank you.
We could, if you didn't want to change the policy or make it harder to change the policy, you could make the policy a bylaw. And then, I think that's a 2/3 vote, rather than a simple majority. It's a good policy to have, because if you abide by that policy, when it comes time to borrow money for a fire station, it helps your credit rating, you have a better credit rating. If you keep rating that fund to go below the level that's recommended by business practices and what, ask me, I think the number of it is, banks look at that. So instead of getting, an interest rate of 2%, yeah, you keep going below that, and you may have to borrow again just to operate. So we're going to give you 3% instead of 2%.
You're preaching to the choir.
As I say, I try to be very conservative
Motley looking quiet.
in my predictions on revenue, and I generally overestimate on our expense side a little bit in that capital improvement program and all the other budgetary stuff that I do. Is I don't want to get caught short.
It's better to underpromise than overdeliver.
That's really. And I just think from everything that I learned in school about, management and public policy, that's the way to go. And no one has shown me why it's not a bad way to go. I've been here for 8 years now, and I haven't gotten us in financial trouble at all. I'm not even close. In fact, I've improved our situation quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point where we can talk about using our capital improvement plan to offset.
Well,
people's staff
don't you have
payments.
to change how that capital,
Yes, you have to change the purpose of the fund.
so one article would be to change the fund, and then the next article would be to put money.
Yes.
Transfer.
So by,
Yeah.
are we gonna shoot ourselves in the foot by changing the purpose of this? Like, we can't change the purpose of we can't do a one-time change of the purpose of the fund. Like, if we change the purpose, does that open up the floodgates for, the next time down the road, someone else thinks that, we should offset all of our personnel staffing?
No, I think it has to be a defined length of time and a defined amount.
Okay, so we're not doing it for forever.
Those are questions that, at any time, somebody can submit a warrant article, as long as it has the right number of signatures to change the purpose of the fund. Anybody can do it.
Right, but so that's a petition warrant article.
Yes.
But that meets the same requirements as far as notification to the public, right?
Yes.
I can't start a petition now to change a warrant article, or to add a warrant article for this year.
This year.
You can do it on the floor, but
Well, on the floor,
I don't think you can change
you
the,
can't change
No.
the purpose of a warrant article.
you change the
on
numbers
floor.
in it.
You can change the numbers to a certain degree.
Yeah,
you can't say all of a sudden, I want to make the personnel fund.
yeah.
So, as long as everybody understands that, I could give an example. Last year is when we were trying to set money aside to buy a fire engine, and there was someone tried to do an amendment to say, not buy it, let's renovate it, where you can't use the fund to renovate an engine, whereas you can use the fund to buy an engine, because the purpose of the warrant article
Is
purchasing.
is purchasing, not maintenance and repairs.
Just like originally we had for the second command vehicle, we had a model specific and we changed it to be just a mount.
Yeah, it's a generic, it has to be generic too.
Is what we need now is a number, like our total dollar figure that we're shooting for?
That would be a good thing, if you had the projected cost of the personnel, all in, for
Year.
this year, next year, is 2023, and then 2024.
What happened? What happens if, okay, the grant was for $900 and something thousand,
Yeah,
and we don't use it?
so,
Because the insurance or whatever, you know, they took, they were all singles. So, you know, we saved, over the life of the grant, we saved, $80,000.
so, ultimately, we will use it all.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like that you're gonna use it all on the allowed expenses, where, all the expenses that you can use on a grant right now for salary and benefits,
Yeah.
and, overtime that you could account for in the thing, you could do an amendment to the grant. You'd have to ask them if you could use it for other overtime purposes or something like that. Ultimately, last year, we didn't use all of the, say, I think it's like $320 a year, we worked it out, so it's $320, $320. Well, last year, we didn't use that amount, so we have a balance. This year, we'll probably use about that amount, and next year, we'll probably use more than that, but we'll take the balance from here and move it there.
Okay.
It's,
I know it's a long shot, but I think we talked about it at the budget stuff, isn't there a way we can apply to extend the grant, but it's a very low percentage that get awarded? Is that
it's, yeah, it's
accurate?
actually not extending the grant, it's you actually file a
Oh, it's
new
a
grant, but it is to prevent the firefighters from being laid off.
That's a great point. I think you need to apply for that grant one way or another. If for no other reason than for you to say, hey, I
Tried,
looked.
yeah.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
We've tried this grant, if this grant fails, this is our plan. If this plan doesn't work, yeah, you get like layers of the plan, and then it shuts down the naysayers who are like, well, why didn't you try for another grant?
Right.
We did.
Now,
And here's a letter that says they're not gonna do it.
Right.
I don't know enough about the model that would work, but would that affect like the rating that we got awarded this grant, that would come into play, I assume, this follow-up grant? Or,
Yeah, so,
like, I know the rating we have is pretty high as
It
far
was.
as need, so do you think, what's your gut feeling on that?
it's certainly, I think, it would be awarding a grant to continue on the staffing. The grade we got to get this because there was one gradient within the scoring system where it just put us over the top. And that was, what standard are you going to meet, 1720 or 1710? Being what we are, I chose 1720. So 1720 says you need to put 10 firefighters on scene within, I forget how many minutes it was. And how many times right now do you meet that standard? Even with automatic aid, we did not meet the standard before the grant. But after the grant, that one person added to it. When I did the predictions out, we met the standard 90% or more of the time. So we went from 0 to 90%. That's like, ta-da!
But is the 1720 standard a higher threshold? Do you need
It's a
12
lower
people?
threshold than 1710.
Okay.
1710 requires you to get 14 or 16 firefighters on scene because those are full-time career fire department standard, whereas we're a combination department and fall under like the call volunteer type of
So when we get,
craziness of it. We're in the, like the middle. So I picked the standard that I know would make us look the best. You can pick whichever one you want.
on a fire aid, automatic fire aid, when Franklin sends us an engine, are they sending 2 firefighters or 4?
3,
3? What about Laconia?
3.
3, all right, so they're all sending 3.
2 to 4.
Depends upon what's
Depends
going on.
What's going on.
Yeah. And the same with Belmont and, you know, what's going on.
Well, Belmont, yeah. During the day, you might get through from Belmont, not gonna get through at night from
No,
Belmont.
you get to.
Sanford, I'm assuming is 2 regardless.
If they manage to fill their shifts from 7 to 7.
That's-
So,
So I would imagine, I mean, just hearing that, that would seem to say that we'd still have trouble meeting the numbers if,
yes, so if we lost the 3 firefighters, the 4 firefighters,
yeah.
we would not be able to meet the standard.
So that would help us.
That would help us.
Have
And
other,
then having additionally, if our calls increase between now and then, which it kind of looks like they are right now, but we don't know what the
Yeah,
year's
it's
gonna
early.
look like. It's early. That also helps, our call volume.
I'd have to research it, but do you know off the top of your head any communities that were in the same kind of boat as we are that got re-awarded it? Is that,
I don't know any.
okay. Or is it a new thing that's sort of,
It's not a new thing.
I don't know anybody
It-
locally that's
Boston,
Boston?
but that was a long time ago.
Do you think people aren't applying, or do you think that they're just not awarding them?
No, people are applying.
People are
yeah.
applying and they're not getting them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their
Well, it kinda seems-
requirements have changed too. Before, they required a letter from the appointing authorities, whether it was the Board of Fire Commissioners or the city manager or whoever, that if you got this grant, you're gonna keep them after the grant. What changed is like the downturn in the economy, like in 2008 and stuff like that. They were able to change some of the things. Well, we wanted to keep them, we planned on keeping them, but our revenue went down so much that we have to lay them off unless we get this new grant. You know, an additional grant to help fund them and get us over the hump of the downturn in the economy. I don't think that would work this time because I don't think our economy's downturned. I mean, cost of inflation has gone up, but the economy is still rocketing.
It seems like every day you're hearing about the government giving out more and more money for different things, bridges.
I think part of the problem with reapplying is that maybe my understanding's flawed, but it defeats the purpose of safer grants, which were to get communities over the hump of that initial cost and give them the service while they could then do what we're doing right now, which was plan for the ongoing cost. And so,
I think realistically, the community has to bear the burden of the cost of the fire department. And the problem is there's a very loud, very vocal minority that don't feel that way. They want to go back to the 60s and 70s. So what we have to do is just be able to present logical information, logical discussions.
And get supporters to show up at the meeting.
Yeah. And that's why I think we need birds chirping a lot, you know? We need a lot of conversation within the community. Without question, that's gonna be a requirement.
Every time anybody asks me about this, I just praise the hell out of having those 4 guys. And I tout the benefits of having those 4 guys.
So,
And so hopefully it just starts to filter out. If everybody does it, it helps.
so there's 2 ways to look at this grant reapplication thing. One of them is reapplying for this grant or a successor to this program. Another is, are there any other types of grants that, even if we have no chance of getting them, if we can apply to them?
For staffing,
What do you think the state will do anything to, didn't they, this, oh, no, I asked this, no, this is a serious question, because I swear I just saw something that they have, their, like, revenues are like $200 million above projections. I mean, give it back to the towns.
I would think that would be a great thing, except that the state itself is so lacking in services that they need to provide that I think they're gonna keep the money and use it that way. I know that like the fire marshal's office and the fire academy is involved with, you know,
Yeah,
legislation
everyone's heard.
affecting those. They're not even funded past this biennium. That they have to figure out how they're gonna fund it, because the fire fund, which is what the insurance companies contribute to run the fire side, you know, the fire marshal's office and the fire academy, they don't wanna hit the insurance companies for more funding, because the insurance company said they'll leave the state, which I don't believe. But I don't think they hit them up enough in the beginning, because in Massachusetts, the fire academy is 100% free for everybody that goes there, and it's all funded by the insurance companies. And there's a lot more folks going through that fire academy. It's a lot bigger fire academy than the New Hampshire Fire Academy. And it's all 100% funded by the insurance companies, our surcharges to insurance companies. I just think the insurance lobby here in New Hampshire is a much stronger lobbying effort, and has a greater effect on the legislatures to changing anything within that.
All right.
So I think the state's not gonna give the money back. I think they're gonna keep it and use it to run things.
I can do it.
You can dream.
I just happened to see a slide yesterday that said
So really, we have kind of 4 things, right, that we kind of came up with tonight, that I know 2 of them we have to look into, and then potentially wait for some more data to come in. I don't know if we have a full year yet, so.
Yeah, when April rolls around, I can run it from April or April,
Well,
and see what that looks
yeah.
like.
well, you can run what you have, just to see.
So we got another meeting in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
So, for that, can you try to extend this out for,
Do the trend thing?
yeah, and then also the other information that would be nice would be the cost, and we just discussed this, the cost projections of the 4 men for 2022, and then projecting to 2023 and 2024.
So 2022, it's already in the budget. So 23 and 24.
So, but can you grab that number for 2022 out of the budget?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so our next meeting is before district meeting.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks from,
Tonight.
well, Thursday, it's a Tuesday night.
It's a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah,
night,
we changed the night.
22nd, I think,
Yeah. The 22nd,
Yep.
22nd.
mass vacation.
My vacation? Oh, mass vacation.
Mass vacation.
So my vacation week is district meeting this year.
You're coming to the district meeting for vacation, right?
No.
It's gonna be.
You did that,
Being out
you
of
did
mix.
that last year.
No, I was
And
there
you
last
did it
year.
the year before, too. You
Wait,
did
we
it
need
the
you
year
to
before
vote.
that.
We need you to vote.
I know, this is not, it's my wife's family planned it.
Don't they know the second week, the third Tuesday
Of March, I know.
It's the second it's the
Second
first
Tuesday.
Tuesday after the second Monday.
Yeah.
I put a
Something-
stop to
some
this now,
craziness.
right now.
This is a good year though, to not
Well, I'll
be,
tell you what,
not be around probably.
you can drive up, you can
Yeah,
leave,
you never know.
you can leave there at like 4 in the morning,
Be back in time,
just come here for the meeting, vote, and drive right back.
scoot right down.
Yeah, I mean, it's only like a 15-hour drive.
I need someone to, I need a proxy vote, someone to vote
Where are you
instead.
going? Down south?
Outer Banks.
All right,
Carolina.
You can fly to Baltimore
Anything-
and fly back in the same day.
anything else that we need to have become
No kidding.
this committee?
It's long.
Nothing else? The time being 7:20, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Matt made a motion to adjourn,
Second.
seconded by Scott. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Opposed, none. We are adjourned at 7:20.